Good evening, everyone, and Johar. Greetings from the many voices of India's 700 tribal communities. My name is Shalini Kullu, and I am from Khariya tribe in Jharkhand. Welcome to yet another session of Tribal Futures. This is the second edition of Tribal Design Forum's month long celebration of contemporary tribal imagination. Over the next 21 days, we will showcase artists, designers, architects, scholars, and knowledge keepers whose work carries the wisdom and spirit of their communities into today's world. This is a space to see, hear, and feel the power of tribal worldviews and to recognize the deep value of indigenous knowledge in shaping a more caring future. Tribal Futures is the outcome of over 4 years of resolute effort by Tribal Design Forum to bring tribal professionals together, united by a shared dream of imagining and designing tribal futures together. This year, we are also honored to have Adivasi Academy Tejgadh, Bhasha Research and Publication Center Baroda, and GreenHub as a partner in this journey. All our sessions will be live on YouTube at 7 p.m. on weekdays and at 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. on weekends. Tribal Design Forum started as a community for only designers and creative professionals from various tribes in India in 2021 with the purpose to explore how design could benefit tribal communities in India. Since then, TDF has evolved into a vibrant space for tribal professionals from all the disciplines to exchange ideas, engage, and collaborate towards imagining tribal futures. We invite one and all students, professionals, tribals, and non tribal to join Tribal Design Forum and in our sessions as well. So today we have Lapdiang, SYIEM. She is a theatre artist based in Shillong, Meghalaya. She received her training from National School of Drama, New Delhi, and the Commedia School, Copenhagen, specializing in physical theatre. Her practice draws from Khasi folklore and the oral narrative of her matrilineal community, reinterpreting and adapting them into a contemporary context. Using her body in physical expression, she explores notions of identity, gender, memory, and environmental concerns impacting her community. Her recent productions are Lapdiang, Nanhar Shava, a digital theatre piece on the Dumkra River, and performing journeys as part of the Welsh Khasi Culture Dialogues. She is a recipient of Prince Claus Mentorship Award 2023 Cultural and Artistic Responses to the Environmental Crisis. So, welcome Labdyang today on Tribal Futures with the Tribal Design Forum. So, the floors is all yours, and you can share the presentation. Yeah. So,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalini, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you also to Tribal Design Forum for inviting me again this year to speak about my work and share about my work and my process, and how I think for me it's really interesting, the second year now that I've been invited on this platform to speak, because as I was thinking and preparing through the presentation, I also realized it's through presentations like these that give you a chance to really think and reflect on why you continue to do the work that you do. And as an artist, you're constantly navigating, creating work, wondering where the work will be shown, who will see the work. But I think it's moments like this, and especially a platform like Tribal Design Forum, that really it really makes you reflect and really think about why the work you do is important. So thank you so much for this invitation. I will, yeah, so I can start my presentation. I'll just share my screen. Okay. So briefly, I think I when I was wondering about what I wanted to talk about, and thoughts that that came to me as I was looking at this presentation and then revisiting last year's presentation as well. I think I started last year, and a lot of my presentations, in many different presentations, I've always spoken about why I returned home, what made me return home after my training in New Delhi, and I was in Europe for some time, and I chose to return home. So I have always begun my presentations giving an introduction about that, the reason why I chose to return. But today I thought something that I would like to touch on is why I choose to stay. Also, of course, I would say it's a privilege to continue to stay, uh, to stay at a place that where you have your roots, to stay with your community, to continue to be close to home. Because as we're seeing now in the worldwide, with the genocide happening in Gaza, with so much of displacement and so much of people are not able to continue to remain in their homelands. Um, Also, with the political scenario that's happening in our country itself, there's so much of displacement that's going on. So I think for me to be able to remain here in Meghalaya, and continue with my practice, that is something that I do not want to take lightly. And I really want to, and I hope with this presentation, I'll be able to share with you why I choose to remain. A lot of people have asked me, why haven't you stayed on in Europe, or why haven't you stayed on in any of the cities? Wouldn't work be easier there? And um, I never really, I think the answer that I have is that I'm so attached to my home. That's the one thing. And the second thing is that I just feel that my work would not make sense if it wasn't uh, working in my community I come from, uh, to look at it and to examine the changes that are happening in my community and how am I part of these changes. So that's just sort of a brief introduction as to why I continue to want to remain. And so I'll move on with my presentation. I'd like to start with my latest work, which is a work in progress, and which was a work that began last year. And it's part of a series that I'm working on. So the first work, the very recent work I'd like to talk about is Basantiyu. And as Shalini had given the introduction, my work looks at Khasi folk tales and Khasi folklore, the narratives that form part of who we are as an oral community. And for me, as an artist, as a performer, as a theater artist, I look at these stories and I wonder how can we find their relevance in today's time? And these are the narratives that inform my work as an artist, that inform me how my society and my community continues to grow and live. So the first this work is a very recent work. It's called Pasantiyo. After COVID, I physical spaces were not available to us, so we moved into the digital space. There was a shift that was happening. I started off with a work which was called I'm Going Down to the River, which was tracing one of the main rivers that flows through Shillong city. And we designed this as a digital performance piece, which is available on a website, and you navigate it through the digital space. So after that, I was very curious to see what more can I do with documentation and film, where it's not just a live performance, but it's also something that we capture through film. So I'll just give you a brief story about. I'll start off with a story. I think that's what I'll do. Just to. I'm also feeling a bit nervous, so I think stories have a way to open up the space, and stories really is what my medium is. Storytelling and stories. So Pasanteo is a Khasi legend. It's the story of this demigoddess who emerged out of a cave present here in Meghalaya. It's called Kakramarai. And this cave is present in a particular village in Nongkrem. And this village is very close to the village my father is from. So it was a landscape that I spent my childhood in. A lot of our winter holidays were spent there exploring these caves and these granite rocks. And my father has stories of how he walked these rocks, and as a child would he would we call it apmasi in Khasi. He was a cowherd. He would spend time. His grandparents had cows, so he would spend time roaming the fields, looking after the cows, herding the cows. So many stories that we grew up hearing from him, and these landscapes are something so close to his life, to his imagination. So as you can see, um, I'm just sharing you photographs of what these granite caves, and in Khasi we call them Umausiang. So um, I started to look at how um, I wanted to move beyond just a performance on stage, but I wanted to look at the landscape that we have and what was happening to our landscapes. And, it's a common story that's happening to so many of our indigenous lands, to so many of our tribal lands, with the government wanting to implement, new developmental projects and the different things they want to bring in. So much of our land is being extracted, and our rocks um, our hills are being extracted. And this led me to think what would happen if I can use stories. And a line that came up that I thought a lot when I was doing Pasanthi was, can stories act as agents of resistance and preservation of an emotional landscape? And I use here for me the landscape of uh, Meghalaya, the landscape of my home. I have an emotional attachment to it, and stories strengthen that attachment. So the story of Pasantiu is that um, she was a demigoddess. The legend says that she was this demigoddess, and there was a man from the village, from a certain clan, who sensed her presence, and he goes to explore, and he finds that there's this person, there's that she was sort of inside. He happens to um, see her inside the cave, and he wants to draw her out of the cave. So he attracts her with a yellow pumpkin flower, and he brings her out of the cave. He draws her out of the cave, and he takes her to the village, and there he makes her meet, according to the legend, a warrior in the village, and they have children. And after giving birth to three children, Pasanteo leaves her children, leaves her family, and returns to the cave, to Kakramarai. And it also happens that the lineage that she gives birth to, the children she gives birth to, is the clan that I come from, the clan called SYIEM the SYIEM clan. So she would be the ancestress that, my ancestress, the ancestress of my clan. And we come from a matrilineal society, so which means lineage is passed through the mother. I carry my mother's surname, my grandmother's surname, my now my son, I have a 2-year-old son, he carries my surname. So for me, the story, it was really about, how do I look at this ancestress of my clan, and how do I also maybe try attempt to dialogue with her, and many questions of why did she choose to return to her realm? She was drawn out of the cave. So these were questions that were asking, but that I was asking. But I would just like to share a bit of a portion of what a script I had devised, which was a performance that I had done in Bangalore, at the Bangalore International Center for Gender Bender last year, this festival. So I'll just read out the line that I had written about her, which is an introduction. This time, I felt a sharp cut. My granite skin cracked. Do not think I am flesh and blood and bone. I am rock. Umau siang, umau siang, umau siang. You call me Kapa Sentio. You who do not care to know my origins. You who name me to claim me, my being, my body. You who simplify me to your tongue. And these words for me, I look at these words because as we're looking at Pasanthi, there's also been a lot of visual representation by other artists. You know, they think of her as this goddess dressed in a lot of gold, and she's glamorous and she's beautiful. But for me, as a woman, as a Khasi woman, I wanted to challenge that perspective. I wanted to imagine her as rock and to think of her beauty as rock, and that she came out of the rocks, she came out of the caves. So this is the current work we're working on now, how we're looking at her and how to perhaps imagine her presence in the cave and also imagine her re-emergence. If she were to step out now in front of the cave, what would she encounter? What would happen? How would she feel? So I'll just very briefly, this was part of this here was part of the performance at Gender Bender, where I really envisioned her to be a woman of granite, and that even her stepping out to talk to us is she's not just any woman that we can categorize her as we want, but she is a force that we need to acknowledge and understand and return to, to who she actually is. So, and I also wanted to talk about how do we claim these stories? You know, how do we as humans want to kind of say, oh, this was how we imagine her, this and that. And by doing this, I'm also claiming her. But I just feel that I through the work, I feel she would question that. And so what has happened now, something also a bit with what's happening with the landscape of Nongkrem, or where the cave is, where Kramarai, the cave is. The Assam Rifles has established its headquarters in that area. And in 1994, 1995, my father was part of, as I said, my father was part of that village. The Assam Rifles wanted to take over the area of Kremarai, this particular cave, but the community resisted. And I have these old archives of my father, newspapers that are now out of circulation, that talk about how the entire village came together to resist the acquisition of the cave, to say that the cave belongs to us, to the community, and it should remain with us. We cannot give it up. And I look back at these archives, and it touches me that their collective resistance was fruitful in keeping that space intact and still with the community. So I think for me, it serves again as a reminder, as I put out in my previous slide, that stories can act as agents of resistance and preservation of an emotional landscape. And I fear what would happen if we forget the story of Basanti? What would happen if we forget this cave? And Kramarai, the cave, is not a location or a landscape that people know about. People talk about Nokalikai, which is a famous waterfall, other attractions, but they don't talk about Kakramarai. So it doesn't figure in sort of the touristic imagination, which is a good thing, actually. But I wanted to relook at this story to remind us to say, let's not forget the story of Basantiyo. And by remembering the story of Basantiyo, can we keep that landscape intact? The other iteration, or another aspect of what I was doing with this work, was also to create a living statue of Basantiyo and have a public performance, which was more like a street performance at the village surrounding this area. And I really wanted to have it at the marketplace and envision her. Basantiyo as a living statue. So I stood still for an hour and 3 minutes, 1 hour, 10 minutes. There was somebody who filmed it, one channel from Instagram, and then it went viral. I'm still getting notifications every day from it, about 20,000 views or something. And they said I stood for 3 hours, but actually I stood for an hour. But you know how time kind of moved and expanded as the people watched it. So it was recreating her as a living statue. The plaque that I had written about her also was just saying, this is Basanti who emerged out of Kakramarai. I didn't even give the entire story. And it was really amazing to see that it was a street performance, so we didn't announce it. We got permission and we set her up. So that's me there in all the makeup that been done. And the people, what touched me was that her story is so much alive in people's imaginations that they responded to her immediately. There was nobody, it wasn't that they thought it was a joke or they didn't understand what was going on, but they immediately felt that they could connect to her, connect to the statue. So very quickly, I'm just going to show you a video. I'll move on to my next work. I just want to very briefly, Shalini, tell me if the time is, if I need to wrap up soon, because I can go on. It's like I told you. So feel free to stop me at any point. The next work I'm going to go, so I'm going backwards. I'm going most recent work to much later works. The next work is Lapdiang, which is a retelling of another folk tale about a Khasi folk tale called about the story of a stag. Actually, the sambar, I found out from my brother who's a conservationist, the sambar deer. And what happens with the stag is, the story is that he climbs up from the plains into the Khasi hills to look for a particular herb. And his mother down in the plains tell him, don't go up to the Khasi hills because it's dangerous. Don't go up to those hills. You will encounter men and humans and they will kill you. But he disobeys her because he wants to climb up to the hills. He wants to explore these hills and he wants to get a taste of Ujanga Ujathang, which is a wild herb that is found here. So he climbs up the hill. And then what happens is his mother follows him after a while because she gets very concerned. So she follows him up the hill. And as she reaches the top, she encounters the hunt. She sees the warriors killing her son, and with an arrow pierced through his heart, and how his body is carried by the warriors. So she lets out this lamentation, this mournful cry and dirge that stops the warriors in their tracks, that they are forced to allow her to grieve for her son. And I made this work, it was 2021, 22. It was also the time when 22, when I was pregnant, I was carrying my baby. So I performed this work. This work traveled to Bangladesh and many different parts. And I remember performing it as I was pregnant. And this work is also very similar to the first work, Basanti, which was to look at the landscape of Meghalaya and the plains that, to look at the border between Bangladesh and Meghalaya. And we went down into the to this particular village of Sobar and to the river Waro, which borders with Bangladesh. So through two poets, Khasi poets, one is SYIEM, who's my mother, and the other one is Primrose Gadpo, who is now no longer alive. But through their poems, I re-examined the journey that Sir Lapalang, I reimagined the journey that Sir Lapalang could have taken up into the hills, and to also understand to also look at the mother's grief as the narrative that drives, to look at grief as the emotion that drives the narrative of border crossing. And what the Khasis claim this to be their story. It is our story, our folk tale. But for me, what I carry from the story is that the warriors are Khasi warriors, and the deer was an outsider. The mother, Usela Palang, the mother, they came from the plains. Um, but as but but according to the story, it's a story that has taught the Khasi people how to grieve and how to mourn. Because when they heard the deer crying and mourning for her son, they stopped their act of violence and they allowed her to grieve. And we forget now as a society, we forget, we've become so caught up in our ways. We forget to give space to grief. We forget what it means to grieve, to learn how to grieve from the outsider. And I just want to share a bit of this poem, which my mom has written. It's called Mother's Dirge. They watch me, watch them feast, as they're feasting, as they're on the hunt on her sons. They don't violate my grief. My wailing shall return. No closures for me, none for them too, none for them as well. Till they too learn to grieve. So she talks about how her lamentation will not give closure until you also learn how to grieve. And she's also written another part, which is the warrior's recall. So the poem is in three parts: of the stag's border crossing, the mother's dirge, and the warrior's recall. And according to the warrior's recall, just a portion of it, an extract, we desire to end it there and then. We desire to end this sound there and then, shoot it, block it, erase it from our memories altogether. But how are we to know that this wailing incantation was wont to stay within our borders? How are we to deal with this wailing incantation that challenges us to dialogue across borders even now? So the three parts of the poem, I feel, give a deep understanding of how complex the story is. And for me, I feel where we are living right now is we've forgotten how to grieve. Or we haven't forgotten, we grieve, but we don't give space for grief anymore. We shut it down, or we grieve alone. But we don't allow grief to penetrate and change us and move us really. And the fact that, I think what touches me is the fact that they stop in their tracks. They listen, the perpetrators of violence stop in their tracks and listen to the grieving that has happened and allows that grief to move them. This is something I feel if we need to keep going back to these stories to remind us of this power, of the power of this emotion. So I'm just going to share again visuals of different ways of how we'd interpreted so the first photograph, and this one is part of the film, the performance film that my team and I had made. And these are just, I also had a theater piece that was performed in different places in Dhaka and Dubai, and in Meghalaya. I think it was very, for me to perform it in Dhaka, so the Dhaka Art Summit was it was a moment that was very interesting and also very touching, because to perform it in Bangladesh, which is sort of, which is in the plains, and the politics of what the two countries share, and also the connection that we have. For me, it was a connection through the story. So these were the different places where it was performed. And I think I will just I think I'll end just two more things, and then I can end, and I think we can open the floor for discussion. Other works, recent works are Kapanonglan. So I'm going through these stories because for me, I feel they are stories that where I've been bolder, I think, to question that have made me bolder to question really whether it's the political scenario in our country, whether it's what Meghalaya is going through, mm, the discomforts I feel, instead of romanticizing what these stories are. I think for me, it's about the discomfort that these stories have forced me, or not forced, but have moved me to the places of discomfort they've allowed me to move into. So the next one is Kapandong Lad, and this is this I was asked to create the story actually to celebrate 75 years of uh, independence of the country. And Kapandong Lad is very little is known about her, and she was supposed to have been a woman freedom fighter who stood and fought against sort of the British. Was and I, when I was asked to do this performance, I wasn't ready to celebrate. I wanted to question what it meant, for India to have gone through 75 years of independence. And so I'm going to show you, and this is the story of a woman, Kapandong Lat, in a village who was so angered by the sexual violence and impunity and abuse that the women in her village, in the village of Nongramai here in Meghalaya, were um, the kind of abuse that was happening to them because of the soldiers, and how she helped sort of in the Khasi War of Rebellion, and how she helped uh, to kind of spring an attack on them, whereby she prepared sort of this drink, and she goes to this particular waterfall where she found that the English soldiers were present in that village, and she decides to give them a taste of what she was brewing, and they get drunk on the alcohol and they fall asleep, and in that process she throws away their weapons into the waterfall. So there's a famous waterfall also. And so I wanted to create this piece whereby it became a voice of resistance. And as Khasi women, we wear this particular piece of cloth called Jain Kirsha. It's a checked piece of cloth, as you can see it here, which is like an apron, but it's what women wear in the domestic space, working women, and it's also what I've adopted as my costume because it's so much part of my identity as a Khasi woman, as a Khasi artist, as a Khasi working woman. And so I created a sort of an image of all these women who stand up together in the Jain and resist and stand up as a rebellion. So the lines that I ended the story, the script was in Khasi, it's kayam jonga kadi kayam jong kawai pakawai kakantay. My cry is the cry of each and every woman. Kayam jong kawai pakawai kakantay kadi kayam jong kari. The cry of each and every woman is the cry of the land. The land is crying. The land is crying. And I really felt that when I look at the 75 years, there was a lot of celebration and all that. But for me, I felt, is it really a celebration? Are the women, as women, for me, I felt it was a cry for help. And so this was how I created the piece. And what was amazing was that we performed it at the village itself in Nongramai. And Kapandong Lat's family and members of her family, of course, who came to watch this, and they were really, I was so happy that they were really touched by the performance, and that this was a story that, we were celebrating her, but at the same time, we were also reminding ourselves of what she stood for and the power that her story still carries today. And the last work I want to end with, it's called To the Men with Hate Speech on Their Lips. This was something I had written in 2018, which was an amendment to the Khasi lineage bill. As you can see here, it states that proposes that if Khasi women marry non-Khasi men outside of their community, they will lose their Khasi status, their identity, and also their children will lose their identity. And I think I don't know if in 2023 it became an act, but it's still going through a lot of scrutiny and debate. And this, I was really angered by it. I'd written 2 poems with regards to this about as a matrilineal society, because there was so many discussions saying that, oh, the Khasi women who marry outside of the community are selling their identity. They deserve their identity to be stripped from them. Their children cannot carry their name anymore. And the bill doesn't apply to to Khasi men who marry outside of their community, but it does apply to the Khasi women. So this really angered me that you could define what a council of men, of patriarchs could define what my identity is. So I'd written 2 poems. One was a very angry poem. It says, men have been in and out of my life, a continual process of losing and unlosing my identity. Oh, the shame, or the horror, the sheer betrayal of carrying a multicultural identity. To a noble matrilineal tribe, I am an unclean woman, lost in her love for the outsider, anyone deserving of her matrilineal love. This morning, the outsider, who may be a Shitang judge or a half this, half that, a riffraff, uncertain of its own identity, and I contemplated starting a new super tribe. Sorry, but not everyone is allowed in. There are rules, because you know what? I really don't give a matrilineal fuck anymore, or my matrilineal fuck is mine to give. This poem has many layers to it. And also, I think for me, I really wanted to question the laws, the bills, that even though there's this whole thing of saying, oh, Meghalaya, the Khasi community, we're a matrilineal community, there's a sense of wanting to romanticize it. There's a sense of saying women have so much freedom and power and all that. But I think we also need to understand the reality that is also happening to her here, the battles that still need to be fought and debated upon and looked at, and how much voice are we really giving to our women, or does the authority still lie with the men? So I'm just gonna end with another poem related to this. It's a 3-minute video. Yeah, I think I'll end with that. I'll just play that. Sorry, these are the photographs you will see are photographs of my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandmother and my great grandmothers. So these are all the women in my family.
To the men with hate speech on their lips. You target me because I am a woman. I am an easy, vulnerable target. Tell me, do you feel more powerful to think of me this way? You spit profanities on my face, my being, my body. You, man, you who have separated man from human. You who are bitter because I choose to love someone else. I pity you. I pity you. I pity you. For you cry and whimper, you poor vulnerable thing, threatening rape and abuse because I choose to love who I want to love. I pity you. I pity you. I pity you. I am my own woman, and my identity lies beyond the bills and laws the petty councils implement. I am my own woman. I carry the matry line of my grandmother and her grandmother and hers. Surely my grandmother would be turning in her grave to hear your profanities. My matry line is mine to pass on, dear man. You who are insecure in his own identity, like a spoilt child snatching that which you consider more valuable. I pity you. If you are not so vulnerable, perhaps you'd understand. I repeat, that my identity is mine to carry and pass on to the next generation. I weep for you will never be able to touch my identity, let alone define it. Surely, your petty bill does stand challenged.
Tak ada lebih merlihat lebih cang tercing.
Okay, I will stop here. I hope I haven't taken up too much time. Stop my screen sharing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lapdiang, for sharing such an insightful and evocative work with us. So, and especially your practice rooted in oral traditions and folklore of Khasi people. It brings forth the powerful narrative of identity, gender, memory, and environmental stewardship. It was truly inspiring to see, witness how you reinterpret ancient folklore stories through the language of your physical theater, making them resonate contemporary dialogues. And everything you showed us today, it was like emotionally connected to you. Those were the work, yeah, from the lived experiences that you have been through. So that you presented, I would say, in simple words, like it was presented in your physical theater manner, and it was very interesting to see that. So yeah, I enjoyed the PPT very much, the presentation very much, and I would have been like delighted if I would have got the chance to see you in front.
Yes.
So yeah. So before anybody would ask questions, I think I'll start with some questions from my end. Okay. So yeah. Firstly, I would like to know what drew you, like as you said that whatever you were seeing around, the discomforts. So still, what drew you towards physical theater, and how did you begin to integrate it with Khasi folklore?
Thank you for the question, Shalini. So actually, what drew me to physical theater, I think when I first started my journey in physical theater, it was I'd finished my training at the National School of Drama, and I struggled there a lot because of the language. The medium of instruction was in Hindi. We had to do plays in Hindi. We were reading, Shakespeare in Hindi, and we were studying modern Indian drama and classical Indian drama. And I always felt this canon of literature that was there did not include the stories where I come from, of my community. Forget even Meghalaya, sort of I don't really like to use the word the Northeast, but it feels like it's very much, it feels like our narratives are sort of not formed part of this canon of Indian drama or literature as yet. And it really questioned me to think. I was struggling with that. I was struggling with the language. And I thought, is there a way I can overcome this by maybe looking at the body? I was also a class, at that time, our director was Dr. Anuradha Kapoor, and she actually gave space to these questions to be asked. She actually gave space to a lot of us who are not from mainland speaking states or areas to actually question what this meant to us to be there, to question that through our work, through what we did. So I found a space then to see if I couldn't express through my words what story would my body have to tell. But I didn't return home immediately after my training. I wanted to pursue my training further, and then I wanted to go to Europe. There's always this whole thing of we discover new lands. So I was fortunate to get a scholarship to go to this particular school. I wanted to train in physical theater. So I imbibed these very European traditions of whether it was clowning or the buffoon or melodrama, but it was really how the body responded in a way where you weren't really focused on speaking. And after I returned from Denmark, from Europe, I stayed there for 2 years. I didn't come home, and I felt a sense of deep of a loss. I felt I couldn't continue to stay there. I needed to come home if I were really to be an artist, to consider myself an artist. I had to find the meaning of my work back home. So that's how I got home in 2016. Because I had all this training with me, and because I found my body to be able to carry to be able to carry so much of what I carried. I think the baggage of so many things. It was really through my body that I felt I needed to use my body. So it was experimenting. Again, I was coming back, and I didn't know if my community here, the people here, would accept what I was bringing. But I slowly started to look at these stories, look at our folk tales, our narratives. And because they're so connected, these are oral stories that you hear about, right? They're not written down, or they're not, you don't read. Now, maybe we're starting to document them, but these are stories I grew up hearing as a child. So they live, they're so embodied in us. They're so ingrained in our memories, and they're so embodied in us. And for me, to take the oral tradition and embody it in the body and take it further, this was what my journey as an artist, I think, started to drive my journey as an artist.
Thank you, Lapdiang. Okay, so we have a question in the chat from Sham Murli and the comment as well. So yeah, your storytelling performances feel so deeply rooted in the land, and the way you bring stories to life actually reminds me of Tejgadh, the famous Native American storyteller from the Chickasaw tribe in the US back in 1930s. I'm curious, where do you take inspiration from for your performances? Do you read books, listen to stories from elders, or draw from somewhere else?
Thank you for this question. Yes. Thank you so much. Well, I would say, no, these are stories that are from my memory. These are stories that have always been told to me as a child, and it was recalling what these stories are. I wouldn't say I would read them from books, because these are oral stories. Of course, my mother, being a poet, has written now, documented or retold, I would say, retold these stories through poetry, which is a written form. So I work a lot in collaboration with her as well through her poems. But what drives me to tell these stories is really starts off as a response to what's happening around me. Way back in 2018, when there was an incident at one of the coal mines here in Meghalaya, where miners were trapped inside, and they couldn't be rescued out of the mines, and they were trapped inside the illegal rat hole mines that are, so much present here. And even though rat hole mining is banned, but you know that it sort of was continuing to go on illegally. So in 2018, miners were trapped inside these mines, and they couldn't be rescued, or very few of them were able to be rescued. And this was happening somewhere very far away from the city, but it really affected me. And I thought, here we are, here I am in Shillong, life is going on, but people's lives are being lost because of the sort of the very capitalistic way of extraction of our resources, and lives are dispensable. And I was looking at the following the stories of the miners who were trapped inside, and I found that most of them were migrant laborers. Very few were actually from the Khasi Jaintia local community here. And I started to wonder, why is it that some lives are more valuable than others? We as a society, can we be empathetic to also consider other lives, and the violence that is inflicted on those lives? So I looked at the story of the boulder swallowing a child. It's a Khasi folktale about how a boulder swallows a child, and the child calls out to its mother, but the mother is so busy working in the fields that she doesn't listen to the child. So I wanted to the work has other parts to it, but I wanted to look at this folktale, and think of the mine swallowing a body, and the body crying out and reaching out, crying out for help. And what are we doing as a society? So I really feel that my inspiration comes as a response to things that are happening in my state, to things that are happening around me, that disturb me. So it first comes from memory, because these are stories so deeply ingrained inside. It also comes from retellings and reinterpretations from other artists and other writers, and then deeply looking into the issues that are affecting our society at the moment. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that answered the question, and exactly the thing that I think it amuses me how there are so many different mediums of storytelling. Yeah, there is not only story or documented thing that you can tell the story through, but we have created another medium of theater, like to empathize with people's emotion, not only yours but also of other people as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, we have another question from Simon Tudu. Indigenous people are often called born storytellers. Do you think it is important for tribal community to bring those stories to life through performances like yours?
I think, yes, we carry stories in us. I don't know if this is the medium everybody would choose. For me, the medium by which I tell my stories is very much through performance. Right now in Meghalaya, we don't really have a very active theatre scene. We still don't have proper spaces for performance. So again, my spaces keep moving. I'm not restricted to, I have to have a very formal sort of auditorium or stage or whatever, but I discover spaces for my stories. So performance and theater is not really something that is still very as a form, we're still lacking in it, I think. Of course, you have other forms of theater exist in other parts, but I also feel that if you can discover, I feel that it's important that we should all consider ourselves storytellers. We have a story to tell, and then find that medium through which you want to tell your story, whether it's through the visual arts, whether it's through film, whether it's through music, whether it's through poetry, dance, or performance. I think as long as that story can move your audience, move them to question, move them to be uncomfortable, to address their discomfort, move them in a way. I think as long as your stories can do that, then I think they should be continued to be told.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so we have one comment from Hans Royals. Wonderful. I was in 2014 in Meghalaya and took group photos of Khasi, Jaintia, and Garo people. I was allowed to do so and was received with the greatest hospitality because of my interest in the matrilineal and matriarchal way of living. I recognize so much of the deepness of your stories in the stories I heard and the contact I had with the Khasi people I met. Your artwork really helps to keep these qualities alive. I feel a sense of battle in your work. I can fully understand. Thank you for the most interesting lecture. Yeah. Okay, so since there's lack of time and we are bounded by time, so I'll just take one last question. So this is from Anupam Purti. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, Labdyang. In what ways do you think theatre and oral tradition complement each other in your creative process? Also, what do you hope audiences take away from your performances?
Thank you for this question, Anupam. I think it's very interesting if you look at oral traditions and theatre, they very much complement each other. One thing that since I came here and started devising my performance is I've never really been bound to a script, you know, and I've always felt that that my stories change with each retelling. And that's the power of the oral, that it changes with each retelling, it changes with who tells these stories. And by doing that, it gives a multiple perspective, multiple layers, multiple perspectives to what a story is. And I think for something like the theater, it's so much alive. It's not really an art form that it's a struggling art form, but it's not dead yet, and I don't think it will ever die. And the same way as stories and oral, the oral tradition that we have, if we continue to speak, if we continue to remember these stories and continue to tell them, they will continue to live on. And for me, they do the oral and the theater, they complement each other so much, because there's also a piece I've written. It's an article of a previous performance I'd done, looking at orality as dramaturgy, looking at how the oral can shape a dramaturgy of a performance. And like I said, I'm not an actor who's kind of bound to a script. I speak first, and then the script comes into place. And then something that you asked is, what do I hope the audience take away? I would hope that the audience would come. I know I've gotten a lot of comments saying that, my performances tend to be disturbing, and that kind of will keep you in a place of discomfort. And I think for a long time I thought, is this what I want to do with my work? And now more than ever, since 2016 to now, nearly 10 years, I can't imagine, but of me being in this practice, I think I'm ready to own that space and say, I want my performances to disturb my audience. We need to be disturbed because of where we are right now in this world, what's happening around us. We need to be disturbed. And that's what I hope my performance would do and continue to do.
Thank you so much. I think that have answered the question. So, thank you very much, Labdyang, for sharing your journey and catalyzing the discussion that deepens our understanding and appreciation for Khasi culture and possibilities of the theatre. So, yeah, I think today is the end of the questions. That was the last question. So, yeah, thank you once again for coming on to our platform and sharing your journey with us. It was very interesting to listen all the folklore, folk stories, and even the language as well. So yeah, I think it was difficult for me to pronounce, but it was very interesting to listen. So, yeah, yeah, I enjoyed that. So yeah, that's it for now. So for
you.
now, before ending the session, I think I'll announce the session for tomorrow. Tomorrow we shall have a presentation by Gunjal Ikir Munda on the topic Importance of Mother Tongue and translation of Encyclopedia Mandarika. So at 7 p.m. evening. Gunjal Ikar Munda is currently works as a manager, culture at Piramal Foundation. He is also a co-founder of Rumbul. Prior to this, he has been an assistant professor in the Center of Endangered Language at Central University of Jharkhand, Ranchi, where he was documenting Asur, Birjia, Birhor, Turi, Korwa languages of Jharkhand. Gunjal did his post-graduation in folklore from Central University of Jharkhand, Ranchi. All the information regarding the joining session and the registration, it can be found on Tribal Design Forum. And also to all the attendees, thank you for your engagement and thoughtful questions and comments. See you tomorrow for the upcoming sessions. The event calendar for the month is up on the Tribal Design Forum. And you could choose to attend the sessions of your liking, and if you want to discover the worlds of tribes in transition. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Lapdiang.
Thank you so much, Shalini, and thank you everyone for this wonderful engagement. Thank you so much. Kublai.